before we do it. We have to understand a little bit about the blood before we do some certain things. So if we look at the blood, we have to know what it's comprised of. That little drop of blood that we're talking about there, you know, that you're going to give me on Wednesday, what is it comprised of? What type of tissue is blood made up of? You guys tell me. You guys know. You guys took plasma, and so basically your blood cells, right? So remember that blood is a connective tissue, correct? Yes or no? Yes, it's a connective tissue. It's the only one that's fluid, correct? All other tissues that we saw in 201 were what? Solid. This is the only one that is liquid, okay? And it's comprised of a couple things. What is it comprised of? You guys said it. Plasma and then living cells. So what is the plasma? Non-living fluid matrix. So what does that mean? It's all the non-living glue, if you will, that the blood is comprised of. And the living aspect of it is what? Cells. So what cells are found in blood? So non-living fluid matrix is plasma. What about the formed elements? The cells, the living stuff. What cells do we have? We have RBCs, aka red blood cells, aka erythrocytes. Erythro means red. Cyte, C-Y-T-E means cell. So erythrocyte is literally red cell. You also have what else? The leukocyte. Leuko means white. Okay? And then the thrombocytes, aka platelets or PLTs or PCs, those are the ones that clot. So erythrocytes, what do? Carry oxygen. Just simple. Okay? For nutrients, right? Leukocytes for protection, right? And then platelets to clot. Those are the big three that you have to know and be aware of. Does that make sense? So far, so good? Okay? So again, when you look at blood, whole blood, that drop of red that you see has two parts to it. You got to know what two parts are there. The living and non-living. When you look at things under a microscope, as I'm going to show you guys in the next slide, you're going to see the non-living stuff in a second. Okay? So what are the physical characteristics of blood? What does it kind of look like or feel like, right? We've all felt or tasted our blood, correct? So what's it taste like? It's sticky, it's opaque, it's got a little bit of a metallic taste to it, right? Why do you guys think there's a metallic taste to it?
Iron.
Iron, right? Yeah, iron. It has an irony taste to it because there's a lot of iron in blood, okay? Color can vary, okay? Color can vary between a very bright red that you see here and a very dark, almost purple color that you see on the other picture. So what's the difference? Why bright red? What does that mean? Where's that type of blood coming from?
Arterial.
It's arterial, right? It's oxygenated. So arteries equal oxygen. That's why it's so bright. What about the, darker colored one?
Less oxygen.
Less oxygen. It's venous, right? So it's coming from the veins, right? So veins versus arteries, we can already see the difference between the type of blood we're carrying. One is O2 rich, one is O2 poor. Which one is O2 poor? Veins, right? Yeah, the dark one, the veins, the O2 rich, the bright red one, arteries. Make sense? The pH of blood is really important because as we advance and we start hitting kidneys and we start talking a little bit about acid-base balance, we have to understand that the pH of blood is very important. We live within narrow homeostatic parameters, correct? We talked about this in 201, homeostasis. The blood pH, right, is very important. What's my blood pH? 7.35, 7.45. Why? And if I go below that 7, if I'm at 7.25 or 7, what am I becoming more? More acidic. This is my pH. pH is power of hydrogen that deals with acidity, right? So I become more acidic. Is that good? No. If I go above that 3.5 or 4.5, if I go to 5.5, 8, whatever it is, I become more what? Alkaline or basic, right? So you have what's called acidemia or alkalemia, right, in the body. Both are not good, okay? Because that leads to either pulmonary or metabolic, right? Acidosis, alkalosis. Respiratory acidosis, alkalosis, correct? And that completely messes up the equilibrium or homeostasis of the body. We'll look at that stuff later, but food for thought, just understand acid-base balance. 7.35, 7.45. That's the sweet spot. If we look at the dynamics of blood, 8% of body weight overall. Average volume of blood, the amount of blood I have in my body is going to vary between, height, weight, sex, right? And age, of course. On average, you're talking adult male, adult female, it's anywhere between 4 to 6 liters, okay? So that's quite a bit of blood. On Wednesday, I'm gonna ask for a couple drops, okay? You're not gonna die. You don't need a blood transfusion. You will not be anemic, right? Literally, it's like 12 drops of blood, just about, if you're good, right? If you're bad, maybe more, okay? But just about that, okay? So it's not that bad. You'll be fine, okay? Temperature of blood is different than your core body temperature. We know our core body temperature is 98.6 degrees, but blood is a little bit higher. It's about 100.4 degrees, a little bit higher than normal core body temperature. So major functions. So this slide here is the first one I want to make you guys aware of. It's the same one that you'd see under a microscope, correct? If you look under a microscope, what are you going to look at when you look at blood? This, right? So the first question of lab that you have to understand here is, can you identify the cell, right, in the image, right? So if I whited out everything and I pointed to this red stuff here in the middle, what would you say? Those are the red blood cells, okay? What about these structures right here that are kind of circulating around? They're kind of purple. Those are the white blood cells. And if you guys notice, there are these little fragments, right, that are kind of all over the place. What are those?
Thrombocytes.
Those are the platelets or thrombocytes, correct. Right on, you guys are on it, good. Wow. You guys are awake. Good, you guys had your coffee, your lunch? You guys are doing good. So that's what I want you guys to be aware of. What's all the, okay, here's a tough question. What's all the white that you kind of see in the background here? What is that? Oh, yeah, you guys are good. Plasma, okay, that's the plasma. So plasma living or non-living? Non-living. It's just like the glue that's kind of holding everything together, if you will, correct? Good? Excellent, good job. And what type of stain is this? If you guys remember, it's a Wright stain. You guys remember Wright stain? We looked at 201. You take your different dyes, reds and blues, you wash them, you put alcohol on them, you basically stain them so you can see them. Because if you don't stain them, you really can't see the cells that well. You can see them, but they're a little bit like, they don't pop. Good, so we know that the red blood cell's job, one of the main functions of, the blood system is what? Delivering oxygen, right? And nutrients to our cells. And it also transports metabolic wastes to certain parts of the body. So if it's taking in oxygen and sending it to the body, then the blood's also sending blood back to the lungs to get rid of what? Waste. So what's a waste that we exhale? Carbon dioxide. What's the nutrient that we take in? Oxygen. Okay. Our blood is also saturated with sugar, right? With glucose as well, right? That's a nutrient, correct? Okay. And then the byproduct of metabolites, meaning when cells metabolize things, the byproducts of that, it's called when cells undergo metabolism, the byproducts of that is called metabolites. Those are wastes, right? They get sent to places like the urinary system, and you urinate things out like urea, right? Creatinine, and other, metabolites. But those are the two big ones to kind of keep in mind. That's what they mean by lungs and kidneys. So it's sending these substances to these areas. And of course, in blood, we transport hormones, correct? How do hormones get from the pituitary gland to your testes or your ovaries? Through the blood, right? So the blood is transporting hormones, right, from the endocrine system. So distribution, do we understand that function of the blood? It's important to know. These images that you're seeing here are just high power, what they call SEMS. SEMS stands for scanning electron microscope or microscopy, and it just gives you, like, this is light microscopy. You can't get this level of detail under light microscopy. You either need a SEM or a TEM, right? Scanning or transmission electron microscopy to really get like the images that are really close in and zoom in. And that's what you're seeing here. To me, they look like donuts, yeah? You guys with me on that? They kind of look like donuts under TEMS. And then under light microscopy, if you guys notice, it almost looks like a donut because the center's like not there. You guys see that, the white? But I want you guys to be aware that that's not true, because you notice that it's a whole cell, correct? You guys see that? It's not like something's not there. The reason why you kind of see light through here is because it's a biconcave shape, right? You guys see how it's like a dimpled little donut? And because of that, when you're looking under light microscopy straight on down, what happens is the light kind of scatters the cell so it looks like there's nothing there, right? Because it's so thin. But in reality, it's a whole cell. There's not something missing out of it. I say donut, but it's not really a donut. I'm just hungry for a donut. Okay, what's another function here of the blood? It's important that it helps maintain and regulate certain things, okay? It helps maintain and regulate body temperature, pH, and fluid volume. Very important to understand this. So what does this mean? If we look at body temperature, what does that mean? We know it absorbs and distributes heat. So we know this. When you get hot, what happens to the blood vessels? They open up, they dilate, and what happens to the blood? Where does it go? Superficial spots, areas, like your face, your cheeks, that kind of stuff. And what happens? Basically, it kind of cools you down. If it's cold, what happens? Your blood vessels vasoconstrict, and where does your blood go? To your core to keep you warm. So is that body temperature regulation? For sure, definitely, okay? If we're talking about pH, we mentioned this earlier, but I'm reiterating again. It helps maintain the buffering system of the body. What's the buffering system of the body? H2CO3. You guys know what that is? Anybody take chemistry? You won't go into hardcore chemistry, just ask me. That's carbonic acid, okay? So I'm gonna put a C right here, okay? It's carbonic acid, okay? Carbonic acid. So is carbonic acid a weak acid or a weak base? A weak acid, right? Because the name tells you, acid. And that means that HCO3 is what? It's a base. You guys know what HCO3 is? Bicarb. Perfect. Yeah, good job. Bicarbonate. So bicarb is the base, or the alkaline. Carbonic acid is the acid. So what does that mean? That means that I have this acid-base buffering system. If I become a little bit too acidic, do I have a system in place to kind of bring me back? So if I'm dipping into the acid range, what's going to become more active? Bicarb production. And if I become too alkaline, what's going to become activated? Carbonic acid to bring me back. Make sense? This is called the acid-base buffering system. It helps monitor and maintain my pH. Okay? What's my pH of blood? What's the magic number? 7.35, 7.45. Okay, you gotta know that one. And the last one here is fluid volume. What does that mean when we talk about the maintenance and regulation of fluid volume? Well, there's something called osmotic pressure, right, that we have to make sure that the fluid in my vessels stays in my vessels. I think we talked about this in 201, a concept here. There's a protein that I have that's going to ensure that my blood colloid osmotic pressure is maintained, right? So therefore, the blood that's in my vessels does not leak out into the extravascular space, right? It stays in the vascular space. There's a pull, if you will, right? The pull is provided by a protein. What's that protein? Albumin. Done. Okay, so very good. Albumin is a protein that's found, it's the most abundant protein we have in blood. That's going to be the pulling force or pulling power that we call the blood colloid osmotic pressure, right? It helps maintain or keep blood in the vessel, in the vascular space. That's its job. Does that make sense? When we talk about fluid volume, that's important, okay? So when they say using blood proteins, what's a protein you gotta know? Albumin. Albumin, the most abundant protein. Albumin is the one that's gonna help regulate your blood colloid osmotic pressure. What's blood colloid osmotic pressure mean? It's the pull of the protein to maintain or to ensure that blood stays in the vascular space. Okay?
You said albumin? Is that what you said?
Albumin, yep. What's another function of the blood? Protection, right? How does the blood protect? Well, it prevents blood loss. How does it prevent blood loss? There's two elements to keep in mind here. There's two parts to it. Something called plasma proteins. Plasma proteins are not a platelet, correct? That's why they're called what? Plasma proteins. Where are plasma proteins found? In the plasma, right? In plasma, yeah, okay? Platelets are different. Platelets are cells, right? These are fragments. These are protein fragments that help with the clotting process, that do overlap with your platelets, okay? Speaking about platelets, platelets also are an important cell because they also help with clot formation. So do you see how we have two parts to it, like a 1-2 punch, right? That's helping to prevent blood loss. Because if you don't have platelets, if you don't have plasma proteins, and if you hurt yourself, can you clot? No. So what happens? You're gonna bleed out, basically, right? Are there inherited diseases that kind of fall along those lines, right? Yeah, for sure, okay? Another one, preventing infections. What's the point here of preventing infections? What cell helps with infections? White blood cells. Now, by the way, we have 5 different types of white blood cells in the body, right? And they all have a slightly specific function as to what they kind of attack. right? We'll find that out in, later on today. I'm gonna say like maybe Wednesday, but no, you get the whole thing today. 5 of those platelets you gotta, but for now, at this point in time where we are, all you gotta know is white blood cells, WBCs, leukocytes equals protection against what? Anything that is non-self. Okay, so anything that is non-self. You wanna say a microbe? Sure. You wanna say transplanted tissue? Okay, I'm with you on that. Whatever it is. You wanna say a hapten, an antigen? Sure. Whatever you wanna say. Whatever your favorite non-self, thing is, say it. Okay, so prevents infection. Make sense? We also have antibodies. Antibodies are not white blood cells, correct? Okay, they're antibodies. Where are antibodies found? In plasma, right? That's where they're found. So just be aware. And there's also 5 antibodies, by the way. So there's 5 WBCs and there's 5 antibodies. So that's kind of interesting. So do we understand protection? Main functions there? Okay. So really important for you guys to understand that. Let me just see real quick. This real fast. Okay, that right there. The one thing that you just have to know for this here is there a relationship between hormones and blood? Yes. What's the relationship? Blood volume. So my blood volume, how much blood do I have in my body? Just about, we said anywhere between 5 to 6 liters, just about. The average, what they do in textbooks is 5, right? 5 liters, okay. So I've got 5 liters in my body right now of blood, and that blood that's circulating through my arteries principally creates a pressure, correct? And this is called my blood pressure. And my blood pressure is necessary, it's vital for me, because if I don't maintain my blood pressure, that blood can't get to where? Organs, and then I can have what? Organ failure if I don't have that blood reach those organs, correct? So blood pressure is vital. So do you think there's a hormonal component to blood pressure regulation? For sure. So there's some hormones that help increase or vasoconstrict my vessels to increase my blood pressure. There's some that are going to vasodilate to help decrease my blood pressure, okay? So on the side of hormones that help decrease blood pressure, there's really only one you have to know. It's called ANP, and that stands for atrial natriuretic peptide. Atrial natriuretic peptide. Where do you think this hormone is produced? Atrial? In the atrium of what? Of the heart, exactly, at the atrium of the heart, okay? Yeah, and its main job is going to be to vasodilate. So if something vasodilates, the vessel opens up, what happens to blood pressure? Does it go up or down? Yeah. Down. So it's the only hormone really that deals with decreasing blood pressure, okay? How? By doing what to my vessels? Dilating, okay? All the other hormones that you're ever going to read about all increase blood pressure. The main action there is vasoconstriction for the most part. For example, aldosterone is a common one that you're going to read about. We're going to learn more about them later. But aldosterone is really important because what's aldosterone kind of doing? What's its main job? It's going to be to conserve sodium. Okay, so aldosterone is produced from your adrenal cortex. So do you know like the gland that sits on top of your kidney? It's called the adrenal gland, right, or suprarenal gland. And that little gland there produces a whole bunch of hormones, right, a lot of hormones. One of the hormones it produces is aldosterone, okay? And when aldosterone is stimulated, when it's secreted, what ends up happening is that it's going to target the kidney, specifically the tubular network of the kidney. And when it's activated, it's going to start to do what to sodium? Absorb more and more of that sodium. And as I absorb more and more of that sodium, what happens to my blood pressure? It goes up. Because sodium and water is like the pull, right? Sodium and water kind of go together. So where sodium goes, water goes. So what's the byproduct or consequence of absorbing more sodium? More water comes into the cell, more sodium comes into the cell. What happens to my blood volume? It goes up. What happens to my blood pressure? It goes up. Clinically speaking, why is that relevant to you? Because what do we tell all our hypertensive patients not to do? To reduce their sodium or salt intake. This is why, okay? So it's really important for you guys to understand the way this hormone works, okay? Another hormone to kind of keep in mind is ADH. ADH stands for anti-diuretic hormone, okay? Anti, meaning against. Diuretic, meaning diuresis. What's diuresis? To urinate, right? So if my anti-diuretic or ADH hormone gets activated, what am I not going to do? Urinate. So what happens to my blood volume? It goes up. What happens to my blood pressure? It goes up, okay? So that's another hormone to kind of keep in mind that deals with blood volume and blood pressure. Make sense? So 3 for now. What's the one that decreases? ANP, atrial natriuretic peptide, correct? You guys cool with that one? And give me 2 that increase blood pressure dynamics? Aldosterone and ADH. Are there more?
Yes.
For sure, but for now, you can kind of keep those in mind. Okay. Let's take a look at this part here. I wish we could do this type of lab here. When I take blood draw, and I mean like a couple drops, I literally mean a couple because it's a finger prick. It's not venous blood draw. I don't think we're able to do venous blood draws here at the labs. So we do little finger sticks, which are, you know, whatever. They're fun, but I'd like to do one of these guys. Stab on you guys. So when you guys do a venipuncture, there's something to kind of keep in mind and note, okay? First thing is you're going to assess your patient. The next thing is you're going to tie a little tourniquet, you know, above the bend of the elbow, right, at just about like 2 inches or so. You don't want to leave that tourniquet on for too long, right? Usually the rule is about a minute, right? Because anything more than that is you're going to cause what's called hemoconcentration, and your values might get a little skewed, right? And then if that happens, you might have to redo it again. And then I don't know about you, but I'm not telling the patient that, right? You guys are. So if you guys have to tell the patient that, I got to redraw your blood again, they're not going to be very happy. So just be aware of that. Once you find the vein, you can untie it, correct? Just food for thought for later, not for now, but for later. Anyway, blood is drawn from a vein. What veins are good sources? If you guys look at what is this called? The antecubital fossa. You guys remember that? So antecubital fossa is the eye of your elbow, right? The inlet of your elbow. There's some veins that are found in this location that are prime. So what's the big one here? The median cubital vein. That's the vein that crosses over the bend of your elbow. And most people, you can feel it, you can palpate it, you can see it, right? That's the go-to vein for most people. Most people have that same anatomy, right? I looked at my arms earlier, and I noticed that I have my basilar vein and median cubital vein look like this. Perfect. But on one arm. On the other arm, it doesn't look that way, right? So you have to assess your patients to figure out which arm is going to be a prime arm to draw blood from, to make it easier on yourselves, correct? Does that make sense to you guys? Just like food for thought, right? Later, make it easy on you. With your non-dominant hand, what you do is you anchor that vein, right? How do you anchor? You just kind of pull down on the skin to make sure it doesn't roll, get away from you. With your dominant hand, basically, you're going to be using one hand to kind of use the evap containers to go in and out. You can stabilize with the other hand too, the non-dominant hand. Some people, if you're really good with one hand. You don't want to lose the vein. You want to be quick with it. After you're done with the tubes, you might want to just kind of roll them real quick, just so they don't clot or coagulate. Even though some do have anticoagulants in them, you do want to give them a little roll, a little, what's it called, agitation. Then you take these samples to something called the centrifuge, right? You guys see this machine here? The centrifuge basically spins around at like 4,500, 500 RPMs, like revolutions per minute. So it spins really quick. And what it does is it separates the blood. So we had whole blood, if you guys notice here, correct? And the centrifuge is going to separate your, heavy substances from your light substances. So what's heavy are your formed elements, which is the blood. You're seeing that on the bottom, correct? And then the light stuff that you're seeing on here, the yellow straw color stuff, is what? Plasma. Okay? So let's kind of understand this kind of concept. So if we're talking about blood being 100%, right? So this sample that I just took right here is 100%, okay? What percentage of that sample is plasma? What percentage of that sample is actual, like, formed elements? Make sense? So let's kind of break down that equation. Essentially, the plasma, which is the coat that you see on top, which is straw colored, slightly like yellow almost, that makes up 55% of my whole blood, okay? So of that 100%, what percentage of whole blood is plasma? 55%. Is that true for the body in general? Yes, same thing, okay? So 5 to 6 liters, we can say the same thing. The little vial that we're seeing here, same thing. The capillary that we're gonna do on you guys, same thing too. So we can actually diagnose based on that if you're anemic or not. And I'll show you, I'll share with that stuff with you guys later. But plasma's on top. Make sense? So far so good, 55%. Okay, the bottom layer that you're seeing all in red, that's about 45%, is what? It's the it's specifically the erythrocytes. And what is the erythrocyte? The red blood cell, right? Specifically the red blood cell, okay? That's 45%. And you have this last little coat that's between the plasma and between the erythrocytes. You guys see that white little layer in the middle, right? That little Oreo cream, the Oreo cream, right? Does ever see Oreo cream cookies? That creamy white stuff there, okay? That's in the middle, right? This is in the middle, okay? So this bit is made up of what? It's white, right? So what element is this? It's the leukocytes and platelets. So both leukocytes and platelets are found in this little coat called the Buffy coat. Buffy coat. Where does the Buffy coat sit? On top of your RBCs. You guys see that? Are your, and I don't know why students always get this wrong if I say it like 9 times. Are your platelets in plasma? Yes or no?
No.
No. Where are your platelets?
In the Buffy
In the Buffy
coat.
coat. Are your white blood cells in plasma? No. Where are they? The Buffy. Okay. Are your platelets in the erythrocyte column? No. Where are they? In the Buffy. Okay. So your Buffy coat has your WBCs and your PLTs. Okay. And that's like less than 1%, by the way. Less than 1%. Okay, so understanding that's really important that you guys understand these lab values because we're going to talk about 2 things that are really important. Something called hematocrit or HCT and hemoglobin or HB. These are really important clinical parameters. Why? Because the hematocrit, HCT, is giving me the percent of blood volume that is specifically RBC. Correct? You guys with me on that? So HCT, the hematocrit, is giving me the percentage of blood volume that is the RBC. So give me an example. What's the generic textbook number for my hematocrit? 45%. Yeah? In reality, does it give or take?
Yes.
Yes. Does it matter male or female? Yes.
Oh, wait.
It does, yeah, because females will be on the lesser end. It's basically like 47 plus 5 for males, and then it's like 42 plus 5 for females.
Oh, it's already in dogs. It's in cows.
Oh, it doesn't matter? Oh, yeah.
They don't very violate gender.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, in humans, it's definitely different. So you can be a female with 42, 41, 49, like 38 hematocrit, and you're not anemic, right? If you're a male and you had that, would you be anemic? Yes, right? So that does matter. You guys don't have to know those specifics. I'm just saying for later use. What you have to know for the class is 45. Yeah, 45. So 45% equals HCT, which equals what? What does that mean? Well, I mean, what does HCT mean? What is that? Hematocrit. What's hematocrit? The percent of whole blood that is RBC, right? Percent of whole blood that is RBC, which is usually 45%. Okay. So the other thing to keep in mind here is hemoglobin or HB. What's hemoglobin? It's HB. It's the concentration of iron in the blood. Iron in the blood. And this number here is 12 to 17 milligrams per deciliter. Okay. So 12 to 17 milligrams per deciliter. Who's it going to be on the lower end? Females. On the higher end, males. Okay. So be aware of that. So what does iron have to do with blood? We'll look at the biochemistry of blood later, but the main composition of blood, like biochemically speaking, that allows it to carry oxygen is what? Is iron. Okay? Without iron, you cannot carry oxygen. So iron is a good thing. And I can tell if someone has adequate amounts of RBCs or not based on what?
Your hemoglobin.
Hemoglobin level. Because that hemoglobin level will tell me, are you blank or not? Are you anemic or not? Okay? Does that make sense to you? So that's a good clinical parameter that I can use because the signs and symptoms of anemia are very nonspecific, correct? I'm lethargic, I don't have energy, I kind of got fuzzy feelings or fuzzy memory. Sometimes I have energy, sometimes I don't. I'm kind of late, kind of like, my disposition is not energetic enough. These are not specific symptoms. That could be anything, right? I don't know what it could be. I don't know if that's just your normal state of, your body there. I don't know. How do I know? That's got to be through lab analysis, right? So what am I looking for in lab? If I suspect anemia or want to do like normal blood work, routine lab analysis, this is always part of it. Hematocrit, hemoglobin. But I don't want you guys to confuse them, right? Don't confuse it. Hematocrit is one thing, hemoglobin is another, okay? So which one's looking for iron? Hemoglobin. Which one's looking at percent of whole blood, okay, in terms of red blood cells? hematocrit, HCT. You guys cool with those? Good? That's good, right? You can already diagnose anemia now, correct? That's one disease already in 202 in the first hour that you can diagnose now. So how do you make a diagnosis of anemia?
CBC.
Labs. What labs? CBC, what part of CBC? Complete blood count? What are you looking for specifically? Hemoglobin. Because that tells me iron. Iron tells me how much of those red blood cells are carrying oxygen. If I don't have enough red blood cells to carry oxygen, what does that tell me? The person is anemic, right? There. And what type of anemia do you think is most common? Put it together. Say it. Iron deficiency, right? It's iron deficient anemia is the most common type of anemia that you have here in the States, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What age population? What age group is most likely to have this? Which one? This one? Yeah. Yeah. From this one here. Who? Females of reproductive age, right? Because what's going on in females of reproductive age? Menses, right? And then what's happening with menses? I don't know, so I'm guessing here. Blood loss, yeah? Okay, so if you're not replenishing that blood loss, what happens? Low iron. What do we call that?
Anemia.
What type of anemia? Iron deficiency
Iron.
anemia. What's the most common type of anemia you're going to encounter? Iron deficiency anemia. Does that make sense to you guys? That logic? There you go. Make sense? You guys good? Okay, good. See, that's called understanding the theory to understand clinical. Yeah? You're putting it together. What age group? Who's most at risk? Let's go hardcore. How do you treat? Iron, right?
Hardcore.
All right, hardcore, you got it, right? Okay, you could also diet, right? Dietary modifications increase, your consumption of iron-rich foods, right? That too. Okay, good. Yeah. And then don't bleed so much, maybe, right? Stop bleeding so much. Okay. Put it on the schedule. Yeah, don't bleed so much. Okay, so somebody said CBCs earlier. You don't have to know the analysis here of CBCs. You can go like crazy with it, yeah? If you guys do lab, and I'm sure my clinical people here know there's a lot you can ask for, correct? There's a lot of things you can ask for and look for. Anything under the sun you can look for, okay? I just want you to understand the general term, the general definition. What is a CBC, right? We're just using this to evaluate the overall health of the patient, and we can detect a wide range of disorders. What's a very common thing that we can kind of find, like I just mentioned earlier? Anemia, very common, right? To find. A lot of times, sometimes it's even incidental. They're not coming in for that, but it's incidentally diagnosed when they do the CBC. Does that make sense to you guys? Good for that. Again, you don't have to know all these, things here, but you can look for a lot of things here. Okay, let's take a look at the fun stuff here. A closer look at the whole components here of blood. So we said earlier, in terms of body weight, we said 8% of our body weight was whole blood, correct? If we're 100%, 8%, that's good to go. Of that 8%, that whole blood, what are we looking at here? What is it divided into? Plasma, which is what percentage, and then the formed elements, which is what percentage? 55. So 55, they say formed elements 45 because really, what percentage is the platelets and leukocytes? It's less than 1%. So it's just simple math to make it 100, correct? Does that make sense to you guys? But we know plasma is 55%, and within plasma, we have some very important things to note. Most of it's water, over 90% of it, so what? There's other things in there, electrolytes, nutrients, gases, whatever. But I want to focus on proteins for a second. There are some very important proteins that are found in plasma that we have to be kind of comfortable with and familiar with. The first one is 54% there of our albumin is found there. And we already know the primary function of albumin in the blood, which is what? This is where you say it.
Helps keep the blood in the vessel.
Yes, helps keep the blood in the vessel. How do we say that? It helps maintain the blood colloid osmotic pressure. That's the fancy way of saying exactly what Kathy just said. Okay? So the fancy way of saying blood colloid osmotic, maintaining the blood colloid osmotic pressure, like what we have to understand is it keeps the blood in the vessels. That's the job of albumin. Make sense?
Yes.
Good with that one? Okay. Another protein that's really important is called the globulins. Okay? You guys know what globulins are? Antibodies. Very good. They're antibodies. So again, globulins are antibodies. Are antibodies going to protect me against disease?
Yes.
Yes. Are they white blood cells? No, right? Because white blood cells are found where? In the Buffy coat in their cells. We're not looking at the Buffy coat, we're looking at plasma, and we're not looking at a cellular element. We're looking at what? Yeah, but what is plasma? A protein, plasma proteins. So immunoglobulins or antibodies, what are they? They're proteins. Albumin, what is it? A protein. Fibrinogen, when they mention fibrinogen, these are the plasma proteins. Okay? So again, are plasma proteins the same as platelets? Or are they different? They're different? You don't know. Who doesn't remember? They're different because they are what? They're proteins. They're not cells. Where are platelets found?
Up here in the back.
In the Buffy coat, yeah. You guys are like slipping up. What happened? You guys were on it. What, you guys are can't see? My head's in the way?
Yes.
My big head's in the way? Don't insult me. I'll walk around. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Plasma proteins, fibrinogens, what's their job? To clot. But look at the question. Are they the same as platelets?
No.
No. Okay, they're not. What are they? A protein. Where are they found? In plasma. Okay. What's the other one? Globulins, aka antibodies. Okay. Are they the same as white blood cells? No. What are they? Proteins. Where are they found? Plasma. Do they help with immunity and protection? Yeah. Do you see overlap between these kind of, cellular and protein stuff? But are they the same? No. Okay. Do they have similar function? Yes. Okay. Don't confuse it on the quiz, guys. How many of you confuse that on the quiz? Me. Okay. Yes. Don't confuse it on the quiz. Okay. Okay. Are you guys comfortable with plasma? Yeah? I'll take your silence as a yes. Okay. Formed elements. Okay. When it comes to formed elements, we said most of it's basically blood, about 45%, right? Erythrocytes, the blood. Okay. If we break that out, what other elements are found in the Buffy coat? We got the platelets. In the Buffy coat, we also have the white blood cells. Okay. And again, the formed element to this stuff: platelets, white blood cells, red blood cells. Correct? Those are living cells. Where are the red blood cells found if we centrifuge that blood? What layer? Red blood cells? Bottom. What's in the middle, that white Oreo cookie filling? The white blood cells, the Buffy coat, what's there? Leukocytes and platelets. At the very top we have what? Plasma. Okay? What's in plasma? Proteins. Give me an example of two proteins. Albumin and globulins. What are globulins for? Antibodies. To help me fight against what? Infection. Done. See? Good. Perfect. Get it? Excellent. Okay? And there's 5 different subclasses of white blood cells. We'll talk about those later. Okay? Here's a clinical correlation. Okay, this stuff I want you guys to know. Anytime you see a clinical correlation in blood, you gotta know it. Just in general. So what does this mean? A1C test, right? It checks your what? You guys know. It checks blood sugar. Basically, it gives the average level of blood glucose levels over a couple months, right? About 2 to 3 months worth of estimation. It's different than when you do like the finger prick, because sometimes some patients, they'll be like, they know their appointment's coming up and they behave. I like that. They behave. They're good. I'm gonna not eat what I usually eat for 2 days or a day before my appointment. When they check my blood sugar levels, I won't get in trouble. That's the mindset. Then we pull, that's what they used to think. Now with the A1C test, that's gonna give me the glycosylation, the coating, the sugar coating of the red blood cell like you're seeing here. And it gives me a numerical value, right? And we wanna be in the green, right? Usually about like less than 5 for average individuals that are not diabetic is a good number to be at, okay? If let's say they come in with an 8 or a 9, for example, is that good? Like let's say 8, a 9. What does that mean? Not good. Is their glycemic index good? Is their glucose levels controlled? Bad. Not controlled. What do we say? Well, first we interview the parent. How's the diet going? Are you following it? Yeah. I don't know why. I'm following everything. I'm listening. and this comes out like, well, then the wells come out, well, there was this one thing, and you know what, to be honest, okay, look, let me level with you. I really haven't been, then the truth comes out after this, once you show them this, right, usually. Why? Because you can't cheat this test. Because it's following your average over a couple of months, right? So this is called the A1C test. It's much more accurate in terms of giving you a good baseline for glucose level meterings, especially for diabetics. So again, people with diabetes, you want that less than 7. You guys see this number right here? So this guy right here with an A1C test of 6.3, is that good? Borderline, yeah. They're in borderline condition, but we can say, you know what, you're doing a good job. We just make some minor modifications just to kind of lower that, keep it less than 6. Okay? Does that make sense? You guys good? Yes, no? Makes sense? You can't cheat this test basically. That's why I like this test. I think people that do this, Anna, you probably know this, you can't cheat this test, right? I know that's a good thing about it, but it's that's the way it kind of goes. So what do you have to know for this? The only thing you'd have to know is like, what does A1C look for? Like if I ask you a quiz question, okay? The following test is going to give you the average level of your blood glucose level over 2 to 3 months. What test is this? A1C test, right? Something like that. Make sense? So something simple. You don't have to know numbers or anything like that, okay? Okay. Blood plasma, like we said before, we understand that it's 90% water, 90% protein, 1% other elements. There's a lot of things that are found in plasma, many different dissolved solutes. Do you guys remember the difference between a solute and a solvent? Yeah? What's the universal solvent in the body? Water is a solvent, universal. Like in lab and chemistry, water, you can use that as a universal solvent. Correct. In the body, where do we find most of that water? In what? Our blood vessels. So the blood, right, is the universal solvent. So what are solutes? There are things that are dissolved or suspended in the solvent, right? So what's an example of a solute? Sugar, glucose, right? What about hormones? Yes? What about your electrolytes, sodium, potassium, chloride, those kind of things? Those are all considered solutes, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So just be aware of that. We already talked about these before. Well, let's see real quick. Albumin, can you guys just give me a quick little refresher on albumin? I forgot what albumin is.
Protein and plasma.
Blood colloid osmotic.
Helps maintain blood colloid osmotic pressure. It's the major protein found in the human body, right? What else? That's it. That's good. Globulins, remind me about globulins real quick. Antibodies, immunity, and then fibrinogens. Plasma proteins, what do they help do? Clot. Perfect. Love it.
I have a question.
Yes.
Clinically, can you go over, I know this is part of the lesson, but I'm just curious, the levels of albumin, if it's low or high, what would you say, like, how would you interpret the low or high levels of albumin on like a CBC?
You mean the values?
Correct.
The values basically, we're going to take a look at a percentage. So we're basically looking at a percentage of them. So if it's like less than in the 50% range, let's say like 40%, 42%, that's a little bit low. You'd see that in patients. So let's ask the question here, where's albumin produced? It's found in plasma. Where's it produced? Where's it made? Where's it synthesized?
Liver.
So you can't go wrong with the kidneys and liver. Those are two organs that a lot of things are made in. But in the case of albumin, the liver produces it. So in what type of patient would I have a reduced amount of albumin? Like, hepatic failure or something, let's say cirrhosis, right?
Yes.
So let's say they're an alcoholic, they've got cirrhosis. Their albumin level, where do you expect it to be? Probably in the 30s, maybe 20% range, right? Why? Because albumin is manufactured by the hepatocyte, by the liver cell. So if the liver cell's not working, what's it not producing? Albumin. Okay. Side note to that question: clinically, how would a patient present with chronic hepatitis or with cirrhosis? Jaundice, of course, but I'm saying based on what we're seeing here. What would they have? What would they present with? So remember the function of albumin. Now that person does not have that function. Yeah, for sure they're gonna have very low albumin levels. But how do they present clinically to you? How would you see them? They would have what?
Edema.
Edema, right? Because remember what albumin does. It's helping to keep all the fluid in your vessel. So without albumin there, where's it going? Into the extravascular space. So patients with cirrhosis, for example, their bellies, I don't know if you've ever seen someone with cirrhosis.
Big and hard.
Yes, they have a huge belly basically, and that's called ascites, right? And what's ascites? It's all this fluid, right? Why do they have the fluid there?
Is their
Pathophysio, guys. This is pathophysio.
their albumin level so low that it's leaking out of the vessels.
Yeah, so their albumin is also low that they can't maintain their what? Their blood colloid osmotic pressure. As a consequence to that, fluid is going to leave the intravascular space and go where? Into the extravascular space, right? Clinically, how does that present? With ascites. That's pathophysio. Understanding physio. Make sense? That's really important for you guys to understand, right? That's one of the clinical findings that you see with liver disease. Does that make sense? Good? Good question. Let's take a little look at FFP. Okay, what's FFP? Fresh frozen plasma. Okay, fresh frozen plasma. Is it living tissue or non-living tissue here? Non-living. It's plasma, right? Plasma is non-living. So are there white blood cells in here? Yes or no? No. Are there platelets in here? No. Okay. What's in here? Proteins, right? Proteins. What proteins do you think are pretty good to transfuse into a patient? Maybe. What's in here that I want?
Albumin.
Albumin could be one thing. Globulins are another thing, right? Fibrinogens are another thing, correct? So depending on my patient, I might want to give them FFP if they've got a condition. Let's say, for example, they cannot clot. They have a real problem, a genetic defect with their plasma proteins. They don't have any fibrinogen, let's say. This is a disease called hemophilia. Have you guys ever heard of that? Hemophilia? Right? What's hemophilia? They can't clot. So what happens? Even when they bruise themselves, when they bump themselves externally, what happens? Internal bleeding, right? They can die pretty easily. So what do we need to give them? Because they're lacking one of 12 clotting factors. Clotting factors, there are a lot of clotting factors, guys. We say fibrinogen is one, it's actually 12, right? There's 12 of these plasma proteins that we got to know. They each have a special function, right? And what ends up happening is if you don't have those factors in there, what can't the patient do? Clot. So sometimes you can give them just the clotting factor they need. Do you think that's expensive though? Very expensive. Or you can get FFP, which is much cheaper, right? But you never want to give someone like that's a hemophiliac whole blood, because why not? Why not just give whole blood? Because what are they missing is the clotting factor. If you give whole blood, what are you doing? You're going to give them volume overload, right? They don't need that extra blood. They're just missing the clotting factors. Does that make sense to you guys? Right? So that's what FFP is, fresh frozen plasma, okay? Serum versus plasma. I think I talked about this about the recordings. You can read up on that too. I don't really care too much about that. Functions. Tables. So again, tables are great because they can kind of break things down for you guys. Once again, to summarize, we've kind of gone through all this before, but it's good to review that stuff. Okay, that's it for like the lab kind of stuff that we can kind of go over for today. We're gonna do one thing real quick and then we're gonna go to lecture, yeah? So grab your microscopes out. We're gonna look at blood under the microscope. Okay, and I want you guys to find it and then call me over and then you guys are done with lab. All right, so here's your blood smear. If you can identify one of the three cells, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, it should take you about 10 to 15 minutes. And then we'll go over the lecture. If you guys want to partner up, feel free to partner up with people of two. Yes, I do. I didn't have a chance to look at it yet, but I just see that you sent something over with instructions or plan or something like that. So I'll take a look at it tonight. I was bad yesterday. I never eat pizza. I ate pizza yesterday. Yeah. I felt horrible.
She really.
Yeah, yeah. Usually I don't do that.
Oh, I thought
Just do that.
Oh,
Yeah, just go.
But I'll take a look at it. Yeah,
You ready for questions?
I will. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm gonna look at it and ask you a question. Every time I come over, I ask you a question.
So, I took 201 online.
Yeah.
During-
Oh, okay.
During, basketball thing, so
Yeah.
I'll go through them right now.
Oh, okay, okay. I can help you out.
I mean, I know how to turn on a microscope
Yeah, yeah.
and stuff, but
Oh, okay,
like,
sure.
I didn't do this last
Yeah,
class
yeah,
like
no worries.
everybody else.
You know how to
Okay. Yeah, Milan has some experience with the lab, so she can help you out. So, your name? James? So James was back. Okay. With COVID. So you're pretty comfortable with that. You want that dynamic? Good. You took micro already, right? Okay, so you're an expert. So just want to come through.
So it's like a microscope, people are going in their bags, I'm like, I forgot my microscope.
No, don't worry. No, that's
I'm just kidding.
You see it?
Okay, James. Milan.
You
Milan's
still
got,
recording?
like micro experience too, so she's gonna
You still recording?
walk you through whatever questions you have.
Yeah.
And if you have questions, just let me know.
Stop.